Hey there, welcome to the Goodlife Community Church Podcast. It's so good to have you join us. This is where we stay up to date with the teaching from our Sunday gatherings every week. So they get released at 4 p.m. on Tuesdays on Spotify, Apple and YouTube. For 8 weeks, we're doing the Practicing the Way of Jesus course by John Marcoma and his team. It's a blueprint on spiritual formation and becoming a disciple of Jesus. You can find extra resources at practicingtheway.org. I really hope that you can lean in and discover with us what it means to follow Jesus as a way of life and see formation integrated into our church and into us individually.
Well, we are going to start this new series for the next 8 weeks. We're going to be doing this idea, exploring based on the book here, Practicing the Way of Jesus. For 8 weeks, we're going to practice. Just have a go. What do you think? No, that's not what we're going to do. We're actually going to begin a process for some of us of reorientating our entire lives towards what it means to learn the radical way of Jesus. This will not be a 30-minute piano lesson on Wednesday afternoon where you just do a little bit of practice. Did anyone, by the way, do piano lessons growing up? Can I get a show of hands if you did piano lessons growing up? All right. Here's how I practiced growing up, because I just want to draw the distinction between what you might think practicing is versus what this book thesis of practicing is about. Because I think some people think, we're just going to have a little bit of a practice following Jesus, see what that's like. And yes, everyone's invited to taste and see and to have a go, dip your toe in the water, so to speak. But for our community here, we're going to go next level. And it will not be the way I used to prepare for my lesson on I think it was a Wednesday afternoon. And it was panic just before, where I quickly got out the book while my brothers were getting their lessons, and I made a pretend piano in front of me on the table where we were having afternoon tea. Where I was trying to imagine and have a quick look to go, okay, what's she going to ask me to do? Quickly do this. There was a similar pattern that applied with school too, as how I approached my studies and exams like that, just before absolute panic that set in. And then I would go in and the teacher would almost never say, let's go over the thing that I just did a quick practice of. It would always be something else that I didn't think about. That she said to me clearly, I want you to spend 30 minutes each day this week practicing this. Do you reckon I did it? No. But you know what? I'm more than happy to tell people I play the piano. If you're like, hey, you a piano lover? Yeah, I'm a piano lover. Do you play the piano? Yeah, I play a bit. Don't ask me to get up at a party and play a song for everyone. Or maybe I can play a couple of little blues tracks. Would you like me to play one right now? You're way too kind. We're definitely not going to do that. But here's the distinction straight off the bat at the beginning. We are not going to be saying that practicing the way of Jesus for the next 8 weeks is going to be like a 30-minute practice or lesson during the week. Right at the beginning, the whole idea of why we're doing the next 8 weeks on this is to be a catalyst for us to reflect, to think, to consider, what does it mean to follow Jesus? Because we have a big problem, in particular in the Western world as it relates to Christianity, the religion, and that is this. A lot of people love Jesus. A lot of people say they're Christians. A lot of people love the idea of being a Christian and want everyone else to be one too, but they don't look a whole lot like Jesus. Now, the good news is everyone's loved and accepted and embraced and welcomed into the life of the kingdom of God. So this is not an invitation for us to work harder. This is an invitation for us to allow God to transform us. And so for the next 8 weeks, we're going to delve in. Some of us are going to try and go as deep as we can. And the invitation is open to everyone to say, what if I was to put aside kind of everything, kind of like blank slate? It's the beginning of a new week. Piano lessons will be coming up. what would it look like if I was to actually say, do you know what? Let's start again. And let's imagine we're hearing this for the first time, and we hear the words of Jesus to us say, come and follow me. And we decide to say yes, and to actually really encounter and discover what it's like to be a follower of Jesus. I want to begin by looking at this scripture, and it's found in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, and it says this: as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I'll send you out to fish for people. That's a kind of a weird phrase, would you say? Would you agree? Like some of us go, I know theologically what that means. Great. But if someone just comes up to you and then they say, hey, Audrey, come and follow me. You're not going to be fishing anymore for fish. We're going to fish for people. You're going to go, Dad, Mom, there's a weird man and he's inviting me to go and fish for people. That sounds dangerous. It sounds like something I'm going to get in trouble for doing. We're going to hook people, or we're going to net people, and we're going to bring them in. That just sounds weird. But Jesus says this. And then, interestingly, look at the response. Jesus said, I'll send you out to fish for people. At once, they left their nets and they followed him. What a weird thing to do. I know, you're already a few steps ahead. You've been to Sunday school, you've been to Bible college perhaps, you've read the book in advance and you know where this is going. Sorry for doing a bad job. Here's the thing. If you're hearing this for the first time and someone says, hey, come and follow me, and then you decide that you're going to leave your business, you're going to drop your nets and you're going to follow some guy that says, come and follow me. And there's a bit of a twist on what we're going to do. Instead of fishing for fish, we're going to fish for people. This is going to be about people. And you decide to just drop your nets and just leave everything. See you, Dad. Good luck with the business. That sounds to the family business very selfish. Oh no, the next shiny object that they're chasing. Who does this? And why did these disciples at once leave their nets and follow him? The next verse says, when he had gone a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat, preparing their nets. So they're getting ready. They are working on their business, they're preparing their nets, and they're about to go about their business. And without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men, and they followed him. Now, I always want to be back in the other scenario. I want to be back at the boat with the hired guys that are there and the father and hear their conversation next. Anyone else with me? This. Hey, Zebedee, what's going on? Because your sons just left you and us, and we're not part of the family business. We're just hired to be brought in here to do this. And what are they going off to do? Following some random guy with a beard, apparently. What is going on? And that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes today. That once they left their nets, why? Why did they leave their nets? Now, let's take a detour for a moment, because that's how my brain works. J.J. Abrams. How many people have heard of J.J. Abrams? Can I get a show of hands? All right, J.J. Abrams is a Hollywood film director and producer, and he's kind of best known for the series Lost. Do you remember that series? The TV series. It started off so interesting and then went so bizarre. And then it literally lost me. And because this was back in the era before we had them, you could just watch the whole series on Netflix. We'd have to wait each week to be able to see the next part. I just got so out of it. I don't even know what's going on. It was a very apt title. And so Anyway, he was behind that. It was a very successful. He's been behind so many different, series and things like that. He also did the new version of The Force Awakens in the Star Wars series, which was a big deal to take over who had previously been doing this. Now, how did J.J. Abrams become J.J. Abrams that we know? How did he get his start in life? Well, let me tell you how it started. It started because when he was 16 years of age, he got hired by a film director that you've probably all heard of. And what he had to do was, he had to clean Super 8 reels. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers or knows what Super 8 reels are. Can I get a show of hands? Yep, all right, cool. I have a couple of these. My grandfather, when he passed away, they were handed down to me, and they had footage of me as a little kid, and maybe one of my brothers, I can't remember, but had footage of my parents, and it was like bizarre, because I grew up in the era where you very occasionally saw yourself on video, whereas now, our kids like video their entire lives, like they're going to make, an epic series on their life. Like there's so much video footage, no kid's ever going to forget any part of their life. And the good thing about that is if they start to tell a story, you're like, yeah, I don't know if that's actually how it happened. You can go back to the video and go, I got the footage. That's not what happened, right? In our era, well, this is a great thing. Like we can make up stories. And you know what? It's only your brothers. One of my brothers is here this morning. It's only your brothers are going to go, that didn't happen. It definitely didn't happen like that, right? But you can live out that imagination. You don't have Super 8s were rare. And so as technology was changing, they needed to be updated and put into the new technology. So J.J. Abrams was hired. And during this process, the person that hired him noticed he had a talent and an interest, and there was something about him that he decided, you know what? I'm going to take him on. And he developed him, and he taught him, and he said, come and hang out with me and learn what I do, observe what I do. And when opportunities came, he put J.J. Abrams forwards with an opportunity to be able to take on bigger tasks than he perhaps was ready for. But because he had this mentor, it made all the difference to his career. And now he's a celebrated Hollywood director. You know who took him on? A couple of people are saying it. Steven Spielberg. Pretty cool. Steven Spielberg, one of the Hollywood's greatest movie directors. And what I love about this story is this idea of having someone in our life that is a guide. Because I don't know about you, but in life, we get to these moments where even if we have vision and dreams for our lives, we can get stuck. And we need someone to guide us, someone to show us the way, someone to stand alongside of us when we're taking a risk or we're having a go and say, this is the way. Learn my way, follow my way, and eventually be launched into doing the creativity and the art and the thing that you're meant to do, but having been well-formed and well-mentored, you can go on to do extraordinary things. That even Steven Spielberg says his creativity, his thinking is different. He's going to do things differently, and that is an incredible thing. And I don't know about you, but there's been different points in my life when I can point back and say, I'm so grateful for the guides or the mentors that I've had in my life. And yet there's been other times in my life where I've realized no mentor, no guide can fulfill everything that I'm seeking or I need in my soul that I desire. And so where do we turn to? Where do we go? And this is the invitation of Jesus and the gospel. Jesus was a rabbi. That's not a phrase that we use a whole lot, but the idea of being a rabbi basically means a teacher or literally a master. And in Jewish tradition, rabbis were seen as incredibly respected parts of the community. They were not like in some parts of the Western world today, the typical religious leader who these days, because of a lot of bad history and a lot of things that has happened that has misrepresented Christianity or the name of Jesus, do you know what? If you rock up to a party and you say, I'm a pastor or a reverend or whatever, it's not the coolest thing anymore. I just want to acknowledge that. It's like the old, there was a bank ad where, I don't know if you remember, one of the big banks had an ad going, and at the in the ad, someone would be asked, "Oh, and what do you do?" They're standing around the barbecue, and they'd go, "Oh, I work for such and such a bank." And it was like everyone's freaking out, like, "Ugh." And then, the ad's brand decides, "Oh, I work for such and such a bank." And everyone's going, "Oh, that's all right then." I related to that ad because there's like certain environments where I could go in, cool, they're all Christian people here. And just go, I'm a pastor. Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Wow, your parents must be so proud of you. There's other environments where I walk in and they go, "What do you do?" I go, well, actually one time I sat in a restaurant to a guy who was running the restaurant and he came up and he goes, "What do you do?" And my mate goes, "Oh, I sharpen knives for a living, got a business doing that." And, "What do you do?" "I'm a nurse." "And what do you do?" "I'm a social worker." And the guy looks at me and he goes, "What do you do?" And I go, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." And so he started having guesses, and he kept getting it wrong time after time after time after time. And then he says, "All right, I give up. What do you do?" I said, "I'm a pastor of a church." And he goes, "Beep." He drops a big word that you're not meant to say as loud as he said in his own restaurant. And then he goes, "I'm so sorry, Father. I'm so sorry, Father." And he starts doing the cross, and we're all laughing. And he's like, "I never would have guessed that." I said, "I told you that." And then we had this whole chat, and it ended up at the end of the night when we go to pay the bill. I was sort of hoping he was going to give us the bill for free, but anyway, he didn't. As I paid the bill, he says, "Father, can you..." I said, "I'm not your father, but, he just kept saying it because he had a Catholic background. And he said, "Can you give me a blessing as you go?" You know what I said to him? I said, "You look very blessed already, but I'm going to give you one anyway." And he said, "Thank you so much." And then I just spoke these words of peace, of blessing, and God's love over his life. And he's just like, "Thank you so much. No one's ever done that to me." It's a really cool moment. But back to rabbis. It was cool to be a rabbi back in the day, okay? Jewish families, they would celebrate the rabbis. They would look after them. They would, it's like a key thing. And so what would happen is you would have a rabbi, and the tradition was, in the Jewish tradition, from when you turned 5 years of age, you would go off to what's called Bet Sefer, which means the house of the book, and you would learn Torah. Some people say Torah, okay? It's actually pronounced Torah. And you would learn the first 5 books of what we now understand to be the Old Testament. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't just learn them, you would memorize them. And most children, by the time they turned 12, would leave the program, this was kind of like primary school, to go back home and work in the family business or in the farm or whatever their future was going to be. But these children would memorize the first 5 books of the Bible. Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. Especially when I consider I was so proud that I stood up in front of my church when I was in year 5 and I recited the whole of Psalm 51. It's massive. It's like 22 or 23 verses. It wasn't even Psalm 119, the biggest psalm. We had friends who tried to take that on. That would have been impressive. But these kids would learn over a number of years, for 5 to 7 years, to memorize the first 5 books of the scriptures. Now, most of these kids then went home. However, if you were pretty good and you showed some talent and you looked like you had the capacity to learn, then you would be invited to the next kind of crew, which was Bet Midrash, the house of learning. And you would go through this. This is almost the equivalent of high school, where from 12 to 17 years of age, you would work on memorizing. And it wasn't only about memorizing. There was a whole lot more to it than this. But you would memorize the entire Old Testament as we know it. Pretty impressive. Does anyone, just because I don't want to assume no one's done this. Has anyone here memorized the entire Old Testament in this room? Can I just get a show of hands? How many have we got here this morning? All right. I'm not seeing a whole lot right at the moment. Maybe those people aren't here this morning. Anyone memorized the first 5 books of the Old Testament? No. Anyone memorize Psalm 51? All right, cool. All right, I'm in good company. Now, that's pretty impressive. By the time you hit 17 years of age, depending on how well you went in that program, would determine what your future was going to be. Most, again, left at 17 years of age and went into the family business or whatever it is that they were going to do with their working careers. However, there was the elite crew. This was the best of the best. And the best of the best would be invited to apply to find a rabbi and basically beg them to be their student. This would be known as becoming a disciple of a rabbi. The word disciple means pupil, student. And in this context, for the next 8 weeks, we're going to be using this phrase, apprentice. And if you remember our series earlier in the year, when we did the Goodlife series, we talked a fair bit about this idea, but this idea of not just becoming a student, and this is a huge shift that we have to understand in our mindset. When we think about student or pupil, we often think about modern Western education system where you walk into a classroom, and I know there's a lot changing and happening in education at the moment, but typically would be understood as coming into a classroom, sitting down, listening from the teacher, doing your work, and then going home. The context we're talking about here of a disciple finding a rabbi and begging that rabbi to take them on with the hope that one day they could become a rabbi. This was only for the best of the best who showed the most aptitude, the most capacity for learning and for influence with others. And what they would do is they would find a rabbi. Let's say Luke down the front here is a rabbi. And I've just so happened, because I learnt Psalm 51, I was considered the best of the best. I'm 17 years of age, and my parents are like, you've got the capacity, you do this. And they're cheering me on, because this means status for their family. This is a big deal. One of their children is going to have the chance to study, potentially, under Rabbi Luke. And I know not everyone in here knows Rabbi Luke. I know that things about him spread throughout the community. And some of you are going, who is this guy? He's down the front here this morning. And Rabbi Luke is here. And my parents are like, this is your chance. We're at synagogue today. Go and present your case to Rabbi Luke. So I go up to Rabbi Luke and I start saying, hey, what's the chance you could take me on? Now at that moment, he's not desperate. He's not like, oh yeah, the goal wasn't how many can I get. The goal was, how good are the students going to be? And are they good enough to reflect and perhaps become a future rabbi one day? And a rabbi's reputation was on the line. And so he's going to start quizzing me. He starts saying, well, what do you know? I know Psalm 51. He's going to go, good start. Good start. Who else around here knows that? And if I can convince him that I have got more capacity or ability than anyone else, he may decide to take me on as one of his disciples. But it's a big challenge. And what would happen is these rabbis would often take their students through almost like an exam type process in a way to try and help them, to try and work out, okay, who's really up to standard? Because if they're not up to standard, I'm not taking them on. Now, this is where this becomes really amazing. Once a rabbi decides that they're ready to take on someone that they believe is going to be a good disciple, this rabbi, Luke, says to young Mike, I'm inviting you to come and follow me. And they would be the words that he would use. And at that moment, I would leave everything that I am doing. I would immediately leave the family business, my family home, because most likely I've already been in that program for teenagers. But I would leave any potential opportunity, anything that's been sent my way, and I would go with the full support of my family, who are cheering me on, just going, this is incredible. Like, there would be meals, they would celebrate and say, this is incredible that this opportunity has come about. And I would go, and I wouldn't just turn up for a 30-minute lesson on a Wednesday afternoon with Rabbi Luke. I would literally leave everything, and I would go, and I would live with him and follow him. Wherever he goes, I go. Whatever he says, I listen to. Whatever he does, I seek to model. This is an incredible thing. Mark chapter 1, verse 17. Jesus says, "Come, follow me, and I'll send you out to fish for people." I don't know if you've ever wanted to be picked. I remember that terrible feeling when I went from a primary school that was kind of small, where I was the best in sport, to the bigger high school, where all of a sudden I went down the rankings. And I remember thinking, like, I was an opening bowler, I was half decent batter. My brother's probably going to tell you, none of this is true. I was the captain of my cricket team, right? So I went into high school with a bit of confidence. And I remember going in when the year 8s were going to choose who was going to be in their team, and we were the year 7s. And I'm standing there, and I didn't get picked. Yeah, I know. Feel sorry for me. My counsellor says I've got a little bit longer to go, but I will get there. I remember that terrible feeling of like, pick me. You know when you're looking at him, like you're staring at him, like, pick me, like I'm good. Pick me, give me a chance. I reckon I can do this. And I didn't get picked. And I remember sitting on the side while all the kids were at the nets, and I was dying on the inside. Because there was something in me that went, I feel like I can do this. I feel like I could be really good on your team. And I didn't get picked. And this was the experience for many people who went to rabbis and said, pick me. And they didn't get picked. This is where it starts to become amazing when we look at the life of Jesus. But before we do, there were 3 goals of a disciple or an apprentice. In Mark chapter 3, verse 14, it says, Jesus appointed 12 that they might be, what does that say? Be with him. Be with him. The first thing that was the goal of anyone who would become an apprentice to a rabbi was that they would be with that rabbi. They would be in their presence. They would be near them. Because the experience when you're near someone and you're around someone is very different to reading about someone. Would you agree? Which is why you get the chance. I mean, down the front, we got Jesse, who's an artist here. It's one thing to hear about, to look at the art, to just say, amazing. It's another thing to actually be next to someone and see exactly how they do and what their thinking is. And to say, hey, when you did that, what made you do that? And when you say that, and when you made that comment to the students before, why did you say that comment? That's a totally different thing to knowing about or reading a book. Being with is a profound thing. And this is the invitation of apprentices to be with their master. In Mark chapter 1, verse 18, it says, at once they left their nets and they followed him. This is about presence and proximity. There's a first century Jewish blessing that says this: may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't love being in someone else's dust, especially when I'm driving. I remember going into camping one time up here, and we're driving along, and there's this 4-wheel drive in front, and the ground was so dirty. And the kids going, look at the cows. How cool is this? And all of a sudden, there's just this dirt just all over the car. It's just like, this is not fun. Like, my car is filthy. You can barely see out now. There's just dust everywhere. But this context was different. Because in Jesus' day, they would walk along dirt roads, and a rabbi would walk along, and the idea was that if you were covered in the dust of your rabbi, it meant you were close enough to them that where they walked, its dust would get on you, and it was seen as a privilege. And this is the great invitation that we have in following Jesus. Luke chapter 6, verse 40 says, the student or the apprentice is not above the teacher or rabbi, but everyone who is fully trained, what does it say? He will be like their teacher. Remember at the beginning I was saying, one of the crises or the problems that we have in the Western world is that we have a religion in which many people on their forms, on the census forms say, I'm a Christian, I'm Church of England, I'm Catholic, I'm, whatever their tradition is. But if you were to say, who are the apprentices or the disciples of the Rabbi Jesus, how many people would point to us and say, clearly this person. And I don't say that as a phrase to condemn, but to challenge us as to whether or not we've got the whole thing about what it means to be a Christian correct. The second thing that a student would do in following their rabbi would be they would become like. And this is the invitation. Number 1, to be with. Number 2, to be like, become like. And number 3, to do as he did. In the New Testament, the word Christian is only there 3 times in the New Testament. And actually, it was first used as a statement that people used to describe the followers of Jesus, literally meaning little Christs. But the word disciple appears in the New Testament 269 times. 269 times. Here's what I agree with the author of this book, John Mark Comer, and not just John Mark Comer, I mean like so many authors and teachers and scholars and leaders, I would say with a prophetic voice, who is saying to the contemporary church, we have a crisis. We have people in churches who have said, yes, I want to learn piano. But they haven't actually learnt piano. They like the idea of being able to play. But they haven't actually discovered that following Jesus is not just saying yes in your mind or putting your hand up at a church service at what we sometimes call an altar call and saying, yes, I'm in. I get to go to heaven now, as if that was the main message, which has become the main message for so many people. If you look at Jesus' teaching and his life, that was not what the message was about. It was an invitation to learn the way of the Master. To have your entire life be centered around the way of Jesus and his teaching. And his teaching was radical. It was wild. It was with authority. He was recognized as a teacher who was unlike the other rabbis. And the invitation to us is to be with him, to become like him, and to do as he did. This is a paradigm shift that we need to embrace. Am I just a Christian by badge? Or because that's the religion that I associate with, or what I grew up in, that's my family heritage? Or have I understood the New Testament emphasis on what it means to say, do you know what? This is not just a cerebral acknowledgement that there's a God or a creator or a savior or a Messiah, but this is actually a call to respond to the invitation that Jesus says, come and follow me and be like me and do what I did and see how this transforms you. And may you be covered in the dust of your Rabbi Jesus. Everything I've just said to you, I know. I know in my head. And I learned Psalm 51, and I probably couldn't say it all to you today. It's been a while. But you want to talk Christianity and religion? Hey, we're going to have a robust and a great and a fun conversation because I feel like I know lots of things. And there are people that I don't want to hang out next to because they know way more than me. I'd be intimidated by their knowledge and their scholarship and their understanding. But Jesus never said, come and learn as much information as you can, which is why his school, his rabbinic school, was so different to others. It wasn't just about status and memorization. It was about learning to be transformed and to see the entire world and your entire life completely differently. And you know what? Every single day of my life, I'm finding I'm having to say, Lord, I've drifted away from being your apprentice. And I need to keep coming back to be with you so that I can become like you and do the things you did. Because some days I don't parent in the way that Jesus invites me to parent. Some days I don't sacrificially love my wife the way I said I would on my wedding day. Some days I allow so much of the systems of the world to impact my worldview in ways that leads me to sometimes be selfish, rather than have my mindset radically altered to see the world the way Jesus sees the world and to learn his way. And the really good thing about this is, do you know what Jesus did? You didn't have to go to Jesus and beg to be in his team. You didn't go up and try, hey, I've studied enough. Do you know who Jesus picked? Fishermen who weren't in the high status schools. Tax collectors who were outcasts by the Jewish people. Do you get what's going on here? You didn't apply to him. He came to you. He came to us. He came to Simon Peter. And he says, come and follow me. You know why they dropped their nets? Because this was the chance of a lifetime. This was the chance of a lifetime. Something that they never had the opportunity for. And this is what Jesus' invitation to us is. Do you know what? Like the kid saying, pick me, pick me. Jesus comes to me and he says, hey, Mike, come with me. I'm choosing you. And he chooses all of us, which is why he told his disciples, go into the world and make disciples, make apprentices of all people, teaching them my way, teaching them to obey, learning what it means, like being baptized. In other words, saying, my identity is completely changed. And every time I stand in that position of, I'm the apprentice of Jesus, do you know who wins? I definitely win because I'm transformed, but my wife gets loved better and my kids get a dad who's more present. Because this week, there were moments where I forgot who I was, and then there were moments where I went, whoa, because I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm going to drop my nets. I'm going to come back. I'm going to say, okay, I've got to say no to that thing to say yes to this thing. This is how Jesus transforms us, and you're invited.
Thanks again for joining us for the Goodlife podcast. I really appreciate your support. If you want to find those extra resources, they're at practicingtheway.org. As always, I really appreciate the support by following us on social media or giving us a 5-star review. I hope you have a great week. Peace.